Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. So when I talked before on commissioner, I talked about my experience with consulting and the companies I've worked with. One part I didn't hit on is that I've done that work in 57 countries around the world. So a lot of places we talk about as hotspots, I think I've been to Russia 6 times. I've been to Taiwan twice. I've been to China probably at least 20 times. I've been to India probably at least 15 times. I've been almost everywhere. So I have a lot of experience with the regions and the places of the world that I think that our next congressman needs to be personally familiar with. I also have a very strong belief in why I wanted to request endorsement for this office is that we need a fighter as a congressman or woman that is in the spirit of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Thomas Massie, or even Jim Jordan, but he could do a little better. This is the most red district in the entire state. Think about that. If we as Republicans can't have fighters in our most red districts, how do we ever expect to push back? We need somebody that's able to stand up on things like fiscal irresponsibility and say that if it takes a sustained government shutdown to get us back on a proper fiscal course, that is exactly what we should do. So we need somebody that will be able to stand up when people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Thomas Massie are fighting for issues. One of the things that just happened on December 14th was the reauthorization of warrantless wiretaps on American citizens. Thomas Massie was fighting against it. Marjorie Taylor Greene was fighting against it. Matt Gaetz was fighting against it. In the Senate, J.D. Vance was fighting against it. Rand Paul was fighting against it. You know who voted for it? Brad Winstrom. So we need a congressman that is not a tool of the Republican establishment, but that is a fighter in our most red district in the entire state. We also need a congressman that's got to stand up and say, that brings the experience of having at least been to all these places we talk about starting wars in, and has some personal experience with getting to know people in those areas. We have in our country put ourselves in a terrible situation by constant, endless wars that have drained our treasury, damaged our youth, and literally gutted many of our communities. Think about this. The war should be the last result to achieve political objectives, not the first option. Look at China. How are they achieving their political objective? By becoming the manufacturing dominant country in the whole world, so we all get dependent upon them. While they're doing it, they build a prosperous middle class. We build a middle class where we have damaged young people who went to wars that they, to this day, don't know why they were there or what they really achieved. There's a lot of things that I believe very strongly in. The First Amendment, ending big tech exemptions involving social media and otherwise, to reinvigorate the First Amendment, due process. I'll stand up here and say that I think I will look forward to the day that Donald Trump on his first day in office pardons every January 6th person that wasn't involved in any violence. And I will be proud to stand up and say, we have election integrity issues, and I'm going to be real simple about it. The first moment a authorized vote observer was denied access to any counting room, the 2020 election became invalid. I'm ready to fight for those things. I think I bring the experience, and I bring the willingness to fight, and the willingness to make this 14-county district proud. I'll give Brad a little benefit of the doubt because he was really more in a purple or violet district. But now the way the second district is defined, it is the reddest district. And we need somebody who's really going to stand up on the issues that matter and fight. And fight with those people that are willing to do so. Like Matt Gaetz, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like Thomas Massie, like Rand Paul, and like, shockingly, good Senator J.D. Vance there. So I think that's why I'm asking your vote for endorsement for this congressional race. And as I jokingly say, I know the love in the room towards me. What a better use of me than sending me off to Washington, D.C. to try to get it straightened out. So give me your vote for endorsement in this race. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Hicks? Mr. Muse?
Mr. Hicks, I was doing a little math. Bear with me. You're approximately 58 years old, am I correct?
I'm 58 in so many months. I don't have it memorized.
I was looking over your voting record, and the voting record you submitted, you didn't vote in a primary until you were 41 years old. Then you voted at 43, and then you didn't do it again until you were 51. How can you explain your lack of participation with the democratic system and the Republican Party?
I don't know that what you're saying is accurate. I like these things about me that are accused. I'm, constantly having lunch with Democrats, hanging out with. One thing I will say, if that is the case, I think there's a lot of years where I represent what a lot of Republican voters have become in this county, and it's part of our rot, is that very few people participate in primaries. Why? We can pontificate. If I didn't, if when I was whatever, from 41 to whatever, or whatever, I don't know. But here's the problem we have in this county. A lot of people, like in my neighborhood, my precinct, where I know a lot of people, they don't vote in the primaries because what's the point? There's no competition. They get handed a card when they walk into the polls, and they look at their ballot, and they got their card all lined up, and they say, hold on a second. Every office is unopposed in the primary. These are the kind of things that's hurting us and making people less interested. So if there was an era that I didn't vote in some primary when I was 41 years old, Bill, I'm sorry. But one of our responsibilities is to make our primaries and our political process interesting to the overall community. To the degree that we don't do that, and we thrive on a smaller and smaller primary voting base and think we're doing great, we get little surprises like the results on issue 1 in both elections. That shows a county where we slap ourselves on the back because we came out ahead, where we should be delivering 30-point margins on issues like that. I'm very concerned that underneath the facade of, oh my good, how great we're doing, underneath that facade, we've created a situation where we are at high risk because we've made our primaries boring and uninteresting. And I'm sure if I go through my neighborhood, where I know lots of people, there's lots of young people in particular who don't participate in their primaries because what's the point? What's the point in participating in a Republican primary? By the way, Bill, I'll throw one other thing on there. A lot of people don't run. What's the point trying to run in a Republican primary? Because we all know here it's mostly an insider game, a crony insider game that is not about the best talent or developing the best candidates, but it's about a system of people working for more Oprah's credit in a lot of cases.
So were you in the Republican Central Committee at that age of 41 and 43?
I was not on the Republican Central Committee until 2016. I was an avid Trump supporter, got recruited by John Becker, and he's still super proud of that decision to recruit me onto the committee. I've always represented my own precinct, Bill, and I've always been very politically active. Mark Faust and I in high school at McNicholas were selling Blitz Fritz t-shirts against Mondale. We were like Alex P. Keaton kids in Family Ties back then. I've always been a rabid conservative. People that know me from the past that ever look at some of the stuff I sent out, is I at one point was featured in articles in the Cincinnati Post at the time for basically creating a revolt in the school against social justice education in Catholic schools. We went to McNicholas. So if you remember when the Sandinistas, anybody old enough to remember when the Sandinistas in Nicaragua were the second coming of Jesus Christ? We were fighting against that in high school. I don't know what you were doing in high school, but maybe you were doing the same kind of things. But I know that we were in an urban area in Mount Washington fighting against people that were nuns and others telling us that we should be more social justice warriors. Because, if we all step back, the rot that has happened in our society, it's been happening for a long time.
Mr. Simpson.
All right, let's move to an economic issue.
Yes, sir.
Green, Matt, what's his name, Florida and all that.
Matt Gates is his name.
I don't know if you know this or not. Now, they want to cut off Social Security.
Now, look at this room. A lot of people in here are on Social Security. Now, the question is this. If it came to shutting down the government or keeping Social Security going, even though you're going to run a deficit, what would you do?
Shut down the government. We have got to get spending under control in this country. One of the things that you know, Greg, is that when the government shuts down, about 2/3 of the spending happens anyway. It keeps going. There's only about 1/3 of the spending that the government does that actually gets turned off when there is a government shutdown. The remainder of it keeps happening because the resolutions that they've passed. But I tell you, and especially if you're an older person, okay, especially if you're an older person, we're all going to have to do things to get this country back on track. If you're an older person, you have probably been blessed. I'm 58. I'm not necessarily counting on getting anything from Social Security. But we've got to stand up, and we've got to also admit, like I give this example with education, Greg, is we all knew that there was a ton of rot going on in the public schools 20, 30 years ago. And so we all need to acknowledge that we didn't do enough. And on these economic issues, pay me now or pay me later. What kind of sick choice is it that an older person says, I want to prioritize my continued Social Security payment right now, if there was a shutdown, I'm talking about a shutdown, I want to prioritize that I keep getting my Social Security payment over the future of my grandchildren. Because at some point this whole thing is going to collapse. We're on the road to Rome. Okay, and I think what we've seen in the last couple, 3 years under Biden is we might not be able to get back. So if we don't get a congressman in there who is a real fighter in our most red district in the state, and instead pussyfoots around things like, what if a shutdown hurt some people getting their Social Security check on time? I don't even know if it would, but my point is we, especially in a district like this, have to be ready to stand up to reverse course. Because I tell you, all the squishy Republicans, which is most of them, aren't going to do that. It's going to come down to your 8, 10, 12, 20 that are going to do that. Stand up and start paving the way for us to have real change in our country.
Tracy?
It's not your fault. I apologize. This is really late, and I missed what you said about the J6ers.
What I said was, I'll be looking forward on day one of Trump's administration, him pardoning all J6ers that were not involved in any specific violent act. The amount of impropriety within our justice system right now, and basically also, I think we see microcosms at it at all levels of our society, down to this committee, of a society that has lost its way in the very concepts of true freedom of speech, of true due process. And it's funny. We have got to get this country back. And that's going to mean that we need Republicans in very red districts like this who are actually going to be fighters. What a tragedy it would be if we elect somebody in this district as our next congressman that is just another squishy Republican, or it feels good to have on the resume that I was in Congress.
Mr. Kale. David Kale. Oh, I'm sorry, in front. Go ahead.
Nathan, you mean?
Mr. Hicks, I want to thank you for asking for the endorsement. And the question that I have is, would you actually fight with the Freedom Caucus, or will you fight against the Freedom Caucus?
Hey, Nathan, I'm 100% sure I'll be fighting with them. In my track record, and if you follow me on everything that I espouse and the points that I make, there's not a person in this room that I would not be willing to be compared to on my ability, my views, and my diligence in focusing on these issues. A lot of the issues that I have focused on at the county level, like I think at the county level we spend too much money. We have too much government control, like when we had lockdowns and masks. We should have been pushing back against that. Same kind of issues. But when it comes to those people, here's the difference. To a lot of people running for Congress, they might wonder who's exactly Matt Gaetz and who's exactly Marjorie Taylor Greene. These are the people that I follow. But I'm also a believer in things that Dan Bongino says, which is one of the most important right now is that we should all remember, this is Dan Bonginoism right now. We should all remember that no matter what they tell you, just remember the political class, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, mostly hates you.
Okay, one more question, please.
And, hold on, that's what, and that,
No.
but since they hate you,
Bob, go ahead.
you need to go measure on their actual results in office, and I'll deliver results in office.
Bob.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you do a lot of times, you talk a lot about Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all that. And they are truly people who have gone out and past everybody else's decisions and made these decisions. I'm coming back to when they made the decision, I'm tired, I'm sorry, I'm tired.
No problem.
They made the decision to oust Kennedy. Okay? And,
You mean McCarthy?
Sorry, McCarthy.
Yes, sir.
Another option. Anyway, to oust him. And my point being is that it's easy to find fault. It's hard to find the right solution. He went and decided that let's just go ahead and pull the trigger. Let's get rid of our speaker and throw everything into chaos, which he did, without a plan behind it. Is that how you plan to do things as well?
I don't think he didn't have a plan behind him. I think that's largely a media narrative of, because those people get demonized in terms of what they did. But here's my point. Let me answer your question. We have got to have people in Congress, especially from the most red Republican districts, that fight on these issues. I think that what Marjorie Taylor Greene does, I encourage you to watch her interview with Tucker Carlson she just did. Okay, on how much she spends half of her time fighting not against the Freedom Caucus people, but against other Republicans. Okay, because remember the Dan Bonginoism about Congress? Most Republicans in Congress are actually Democrats, but not a single Democrat's actually a Republican. We have got, we can, you know, we're at a point, we probably now have passed in the last 24 hours $34 trillion in debt. $34 trillion in debt. And I love what Matt Gaetz said during one of the things is, they're saying I'm crazy and we're authorizing $34 trillion in debt and thinks that's going to end well? Yeah, so I dispute the narrative that there was no plan whatsoever, but I also support the notion of sometimes you have to push for change. And Kevin McCarthy had made certain commitments to that group that were not honored. And when people that don't honor commitments made in political deals, there needs to be accountability for that. And Kevin McCarthy, hey, if you're a Kevin McCarthy lover in this room, God love you. I'm not. I think Kevin McCarthy being gone is a good thing, and I think we'll remember a blip in time that there was some chaos around the speaker, and I think there's still a lot more work to be done, but we have got to stop this. We've got to stop the consultant class. We've got to stop that Kevin McCarthy's there because he can do the most fundraising from the military-industrial complex, big pharma, big tech, and get back to more of a grassroots. I love that Matt Gaetz doesn't take PAC money. I love that.
Okay, we're going to cut it off there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.